It's time for the news.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, has warned against a foreign military intervention by ECOWAS in Niger and warned of catastrophic consequences for the region as a whole. The Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, Army General Said Shingriha, has taken part via video conference in the 11th Conference on International Security in Moscow at the invitation of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. And dozens of Palestinian citizens were shot and suffocated early Wednesday while a Palestinian-owned house and headquarters of the Fatah movement were blown up following a military raid by the Zionist occupation forces in the Balata camp. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First, the Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, General Said Shingriha, has taken part via video conference in the 11th Conference on International Security in Moscow at the invitation of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. The Army General followed the opening address by Russian President Vladimir Putin and listened with great interest to the speeches by senior military and security officials and experts representing states from different countries and continents. In his speech, the Army General first of all wished to convey to the participants in this conference the greetings of the President of the Republic, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, Minister of National Defense, and his best wishes for the success of these proceedings.
I would like to convey to you the greetings of the President of the Republic, Supreme Chief from the Armed Forces, Minister of National Defense, Abdelmajid Tebboune, as well as his best wishes for the success of the conference's proceedings in terms of giving suggestions and approaches that enhance international peace and security. I also would like to thank the friendly Russian Federation for their invitation to take part in the 11th Moscow Conference on International Security to make my statement that is dedicated to the military security of the Middle East and Africa, to highlight Algeria's approach in terms of dealing with the challenges and security threats to which the Middle East and the African continent are confronted.
And the Army General seized this opportunity to say that Algeria is convinced that the only way to deal seriously with the causes of crises that fuel instability and international and regional insecurity is to respect international legality away from any foreign interference or attempts to create instability.
Algeria believes that it's time for the international community to realize the importance of preserving international security to deal with the causes of regional and international crises and instability. International peace and security cannot be achieved except by abiding by international law and by supporting and backing African countries to enable them develop themselves inclusive solutions to the continent's problems away from any kind of foreign interference.
And at the end of his speech, the Army General underlined that Algeria aspires through its participation in this conference to build bridges for constructive and fruitful dialogue. This came at the 11th Moscow Conference on International Security organized by the Russian Federation Ministry, was attended by 26 defense ministers and 16 deputy defense ministers and chiefs of general staffs from various countries. Delegations from 12 more countries were led by department chiefs, the rest by ambassadors and military attaches or military attaches accredited in Russia. The forum was also attended by 85 foreign non-governmental experts from 42 countries. The focus of the discussions was set by Russian President Vladimir Putin's welcoming address to the participants. He named the main hotbeds of tension in the world, outlined their cause, and spoke in favor of joining the global community's forces to reduce confrontation on the global and regional level, neutralizing challenges and threats, and building trust among countries. Algeria has condemned, through the spokesman of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the national community abroad, the terrorist attack perpetrated last Sunday against the Shah Shirah mausoleum in Shiraz in southern Iran, killing and injuring several people. The ministry spokesman expressed Algeria's solidarity with the Islamic Republic of Iran, a brotherly country. On this tragic occasion, he offered his sincere condolences to the families of the victims, assuring them of his deepest sympathy and wished a speedy recovery to the injured. The Minister of Interior, Local Assemblies and Country Planning, Brahim Murad, has underlined in the province of Khanshla the need for the local authorities to work to address the concerns of citizens and improve their living conditions. During his working visit to the province of Khanshla, where he met with officials and members of the civil society at the province headquarters, the minister announced instructions to the governors of the Republic, calling on them to coordinate their efforts with the executive bodies in order to respond to the needs of the citizens. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, has warned against a foreign military intervention by ECOWAS in Niger and warned of catastrophic consequences for the region as a whole. Jamal Silmani has more.
3 weeks after the coup in Niger, in an interview with the Washington Post, Ahmed Attaf stressed that he had not seen an example of a successful military intervention, calling to consider the example of Libya, which has proven catastrophic for the whole region, and the price is paid. He added that those who have conducted the foreign intervention have left the country, and they left the region with this tragedy, with this crisis on our hands. He also said that even if ECOWAS was envisaging the military option as an option of last resort, they are still giving the priority to a political and diplomatic solution, and they are working on this basis. The foreign minister stressed that nobody was sure, even within ECOWAS, that the military intervention has a reasonable chance of success. He said, quote, "You can start a military intervention, but you never know when it will end, so they are very careful. They are showing the maximum restraint in dealing with this option, and they are right in doing so." End of quote. Algeria has expressed her deep attachment to the return to constitutional order in Niger and her support for Mr. Bazoum as the legitimate president, while warning against any intention of foreign military intervention. Asked about the threat of terrorism in the Sahel, Mr. Attaf declared that Algeria has stopped talking about armed groups in the Sahel, but about armies of terrorists that are directly threatening Burkina Faso, Mali, certain regions of Chad and Niger. Mr. Attaf said the situation is very volatile and should be dealt with it on not a day-by-day basis, but hour-by-hour basis, saying that consultations are going on between many interested and concerned parties to see what will be the best option to reach this objective of a peaceful solution to this crisis of the time being.
And ECOWAS military leaders are meeting as from tomorrow to discuss Niger coup at Ghana summit. The two-day meeting comes a week after ECOWAS said a standby force could be used to resolve the crisis in Niger. Military leaders from the West African ECOWAS bloc are to meet in Ghana to discuss a possible intervention to resolve the coup in Niger. President Mohamed Bazoum has been held under house arrest since the coup attempt on the 26th of July. And the head of the U.S. diplomacy, Antony Blinken, has assured that it is possible to put an end to the coup in Niger through diplomacy. We remain focused on the diplomatic path to achieve the results we want, namely return to constitutional order, and I believe there is still room to achieve this result through diplomacy, Blinken told the press. And still in Sudan, the deputy head of Sudan's Sovereign Council said that a Kader government must be formed as the fighting between the sides entered its fifth month. Asia Bakar has more.
A top Sudanese official has said that a plan should be put in place to end the conflict between the army and paramilitary rapid support forces amid the continuing violence in the country. The deputy head of Sudan's Sovereign Council said that this fight will end at a negotiating table in a potential to soften the army's stance, citing the hardship citizens have endured. He said that the current focus of the government is to end the war, and the post-war era will focus on reconstruction and rebuilding of the state institutions. He called for comprehensive dialogue by all the political civilian activists in the country with no exclusion. He also said that the violence should end with a single unified army in the nation. The United Nations warned that more than 1 million people have fled Sudan to neighboring states, and people inside the country are running out of food and dying due to a lack of proper health care after 4 months of war. Several UN agencies said time is running out for farmers to plant the crops that will feed them and their neighbors. Medical supplies are scarce. He added that the situation is out of control. The fight has caused more than 1 million people to cross from Sudan into neighboring countries, many already struggling with the effects of conflicts or economic crises, while those displaced within Sudan are estimated to number 3.4 million. Fighting erupted on April 15 over tensions linked to a planned transition to civilian rule, exposing civilians in the capital and beyond to daily battles and attacks.
And to the Middle East now, where dozens of Palestinian citizens were shot and suffocated early Wednesday while a Palestinian-owned house and headquarters of the Fatah movement were blown up following a military raid by the Zionist occupation forces in the Balata camp south of the occupied West Bank city of Nablus. Confrontations between Palestinian youths and Israeli forces broke out as a result. More details with our colleague Saad Bougazi.
Medical sources at the Red Crescent Society reported a Palestinian was shot with a live bullet to the chest and was reported to be in a critical condition. They added that 2 others were injured with live bullet shrapnel and were taken to the hospital, while 4 others suffered injuries from live bullet shrapnel and were treated in the field. They added that a Palestinian was shot with live bullets and was kidnapped from the medical staff by the occupation forces. Additionally, 85 Palestinians suffered from suffocation and were treated in the field. A child who fell in a house that was raided by the occupation forces was successfully evacuated, while another Palestinian was injured by a gas bomb in the head and was treated in the field. 2 other Palestinians were injured after they fell and were treated in the field. The Red Crescent said in a statement that the occupation forces prevented and assaulted the medical staff at Baraka Junction and prevented them from entering Balata camp to treat one of the casualties, who was later transferred to the National Hospital. The occupation forces also closed the entrances to Balata refugee camp as they carried out an aggression against the camp amid the destruction of Palestinian property. Zionist soldiers fired bullets at the press crews while they were covering the storming of the camp. In another development, dozens of fanatic Zionist settlers broke this morning into the compounds of El Aqsa Mosque under heavy protection from the occupation police. The extremist settlers, divided into groups, raided the Holy Islamic Mosque from El Maghariba Gate, took provocative tours in its compounds, and performed Talmudic rituals in the eastern part of it.
And with this last piece of news, we come to the end of this news bulletin for today. Time now for weekly programs devoted today to an interview with Wahid Ziadi, compiled and presented by my colleague Asya Bakar. As for me, I'll meet you again tomorrow for a fresh edition of our news bulletin. Until then, stay tuned to Radio Algeria International, and bye-bye for now.
Hello there and welcome on the waves of Radio Algeria International. Our guest today is joining us on the phone from the eastern beautiful province of Lubaki, Algerian novelist, poet and French teacher, Mr. Wahid Ziadi. Welcome on Radio Algeria International.
Thank you.
So to start, for all those listening to us right now who didn't have the chance to know you or read your work, could you introduce yourself? Who is Wahid Ziadi?
First of all, I have to thank you for having me. I'm a writer. I published 7 poetry and literary books in France and Algeria. And I used to be a teacher of French language and English as well.
So what was the source of inspiration? How did the urge to write start? Because you started writing very young, right?
Sure, yeah. I started when I was a teenager, as anyone who is at high school and trying to express himself. So I felt that need to say how I was feeling as a human being, of course. Yeah, that's the first reason.
Mm-hmm. So what came first, poetry or prose? Or did they happen at the same time?
I started first with poems, with short poems in French. Then, years after that, I had the idea to write a novel, and I started writing it. at the age of 25. Then after several years, I succeeded to publish it in France. It was in 2012.
Okay. So you said you started with poetry. What were the themes that you started writing at first, and did they change with time?
Sure, yeah. It's, multiple themes. It depends on the state of mind and of soul we feel and we live. It's mostly about love and sorrow, grief, some social behaviors. So it's not really constant as a theme.
Okay, so now let's talk about your books and Portrait Algérien, which can be translated as Algerian Portraits.
Yeah, Algerian Portraits. It's about the profiles of, citizen, an Algerian citizen, the daily life and how it goes with, I adopted a new style in that book because, it was less literary matter, less than the novel, because I wanted to be read by more readers in Algeria. And I wanted to make it accessible.
Yeah, so what about the theme, the main theme or themes of this book?
Yeah, it's about a person, and I mean a normal citizen, a lambda citizen, and I wanted to put in it a certain touch of humor, I wanted to make a certain fun, relating some short stories of the Algerians we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the problems we face and the daily problems, and I wanted to make it narrative, but with a certain to put a grain of fun in it.
So, if we ask you now to tell us about one of the problems that you find, in Algerian society and that you mentioned in the book, could you give us one problem that the book tackled?
Yeah, I talked about, for example, our behavior during Ramadan and the lack of tourists in Algeria and the need to get to universal values and not just to be closed in a narrow space, but that was a call, an implicit call to be more, to be universal.
To be more open-minded, you mean?
Right, yeah, to be more open-minded and to behave as humans, not just as someone who's looking for a kind of happiness, but it's not the true happiness with a capital H,
So the latest book that you released in Arabic is a poetry book.
Sure, yeah, it's Ashna al-Qadar, that's a kind of adventure. I definitely decided to recuperate the Arabic language and try to express the same poetry I wrote in French and English. I wanted to be in Arabic as well and to have another number of readers. When I say readers, I mean friends, of course, because how we interact, how writers interact with the reader. I always consider the reader as a part of this life of writing, because it's really a reason of being for me. It's not just putting words together to express ideas. That's a part of it, of course, but that's not the essence of writing.
So what are the themes of these poems?
I mostly write about the love of a woman, whether she's our mother, our sister, our colleague, a friend, or any other relation with a woman, because I consider that the woman in Algeria still hasn't really the place she deserves. So I try to, if I may say, to offer these poems to all the women who are surrounding us and making our daily happiness and contributing to our life. They are making our life better.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's good to admit that.
Sure, because you're a female, you have to, I guess.
Of course.
You have to be subjective.
Yeah. Which is the truth, by the way. It's the truth.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it is, of course.
So we talked about two of your books. Give us an overview about your other books.
Yeah, I wrote, so in 2008 I published Déchirement, which means maybe sorrow or grief or heartbreak. Yeah, it was published in 2008 in France with the Publibook edition, and it has been reedited in Algeria with the Qobia edition in Algiers. It's a bunch of poems. Themes vary, as I told before, between philosophical themes, spiritual, sometimes social, cultural. Then in 2009, I published another book. It was about poetry as well, Miroir de nos êtres hagards, which might be translated into mirrors of our perplex beings. It's always about a call of being universal and to live in this dimension, as true human beings. Then Cœur et Rancœur is about heart and maybe hatred, or love and hate. That was a series of poems as well, and quotations. That's the first time when I started writing quotations and philosophical reflections, and I put them in verses. That was like Omar Khayyam style, or what we might call haiku style. Then in the same year, 2012, I wrote and published a novel. It's about the Arabian and Israeli conflict, and it was about what we can call the shock of civilization. I tried to develop that theme in a story that seems to be just I can say a normal story, a simple story, but when you really think or just plunge between the lines, you can make at least three readings of every chapter of the novel. And he was studied in 4 universities in Algeria, and that was studied as a theme of master, etc. for Algerian universities. Yeah.
So you also write in English, and one of your English texts ranked first on American website. Tell us about this experience.
Yeah, I've always been a lover of languages, foreign languages and Arabic languages as well. Tamazight, by the way, because I'm living in Mskana. The name, the historical of Mskana is Misl Kahina, the son of Kahina Diya. That's why I'm attached to my Algerian origins, ancestral Algerian origins, as well as a Shawi. And so I love Tamazight, Arabic, French, English, Spanish as well. I studied Spanish for a few years. And the first experience I mean in writing in English was a text I posted on an American site, in Boston, in America. And it had a certain success for at least 3 months. It was ranked number 1.
So your journey started at a young age, and writing is a deep, cathartic experience. How did writing change or allow the person that you are today?
Yeah, that's a cathartic effect that's unavoidable when we write, and it shapes our persona, and it has a deep effect on our psyche, and the psychological effect on the writer is well known, and we change with time, and that's why we adopt different styles, and we opt for different themes as well, because it goes with our daily life and our interaction with the surrounding world.
Yeah. So, Wahid, you are active on social media. You share passages from your work. You hold debates with your readers. How important is the interaction of social media in promoting books and poetry and art in general?
Yeah, you know, that's a perfect tribune to promote your writings, and because we interact each time and we get instant reactions. That's something that we writers of years ago didn't have. So there was no such an opportunity before, and we are taking advantage of that because we each time we share an extract of our writings, and so there are immediate reactions from readers, and that encourage you to try to be better each time. And you know, the first critic, the real critic of a writer is the reader, of course, and I was really astonished by reactions from readers who are true readers, who know how to read and how to get the implicit meaning, especially when it comes to literary writing. So it's really encouraging. And I made thousands of friends, virtual friends, of course, and some of them had become true friends in real life, and it's a wonderful experience. I can say that we get out of the darkness of the unknown writers, and yeah.
So, where can we find your books?
We can have them in El Copia edition in Algiers and a number of libraries all over Algeria. Maybe in the Café Littéraire Rumi as well, in Algiers. Yeah, they are sold in Algeria and in France as well. Those edited in France are sold on La Fnac site, Amazon as well, and the sites of Les Plumes d'Autrice. That's the second edition of my books, and Publibook as well.
Okay, great. So now tell us about your upcoming writing projects or books that are awaiting release.
Yeah, I'm working on two books. The first one is in Arabic as well. It's still about poetry and that kind of haiku, but in Arabic. But then there's another book in French. It contains a series of short stories in the American style, you know. It's not a novella, but it's a short story. And still with the same, the same content. It's about the quotations, reflections, sometimes philosophical, social, historical, etc. And I'm working on the translation of my novel into Arabic, and maybe it's going to take a certain time, but I hope that one day I'll finish that work and try to publish it as well, inshallah.
Yeah, that would be great. So anything you want to add now that we come to the end of our interview?
I have to first to thank you for all the job you're doing to promote the Algerian culture, and I have to greet all my readers for always being here to encourage me, and that's so kind of them. And I hope that this good adventure will continue more and more time.
We hope so too. Wahid Ziadi, an Algerian novelist, poet, and French teacher, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Let's be glad that you joined us on the phone from Lubaki province. And now, dear listeners, I'll leave you with this poem written and read by Wahid Ziadi.
You remain my eternal question that has not to be answered, because your soul's the synonym of mystery. We'll hold your hand on light and wander beside your soul through the multitude of wonders. We'll ride my horse of passion right to the fire, where burns your desire, and fight the liar who told you it's mere fiction. The moon won't shine anymore, having known you shine.